Welcome back to Radical Health Radio. Today, I had the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Will Harris, the author of A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, but more famously known for being the founder and leader in the regenerative health space of White Oak Pastures. Will is a fourth-generation farmer, but he's really done an incredible job of healing from more of a classical industrialized farming method that his father did and his father's fathers before him, to now spearheading this regenerative agriculture movement. So we dive into that entire topic, like regenerating soil, biodiversity, fighting this big giant of big food, and these interests that are at play to maybe push us more towards a plant-based future and destroy the reputation and the reliability of things like regenerative agriculture. You know, cow farts, cow burps are killing the planet, right? No, not according to Will, at least. So expect to learn why, what Will learned as a conventional farmer moving to regenerative farming, and the story about what we do for the future of our food. This is packed with wisdom, practical, and a really important topic because our food is our future and our land is our legacy. So let's get into the show. Will Harris, welcome to the show. A Bold Return to Giving a Damn is the title of your new book. And I love that title because it's like a gut punch from the heart. I feel as though there's a little bit of existential nihilism. Like, why should we give a damn? Why should we care, Will? Isn't it all broken? Aren't we just, going to shit? What's going to happen? So, Will, why do we need a bold return to giving a damn? And what are we giving a damn about? Let's add some context to the conversation.
Well, you just said it's all going to shit. So, we need to give a damn. There's just so much wrong with our food production system and how we treat the earth, animals, rural communities. It's time to do something different. No. We're belated in doing something different.
And when you say that, it comes from a place of lived experience. You're a sixth-generation farmer, if I believe correctly, and you didn't always practice more holistic, regenerative grazing, regenerative ag. And we'll dive into those terms for the readers that aren't super familiar with those yet. But you can speak to them from a place of understanding, unlike most people, because you've seen both sides of the coin. So tell us a little bit about the story in terms of your evolution as a farmer, as a person, and bringing us up to speed to how you look at this whole system today.
Well, I haven't just seen how to farm industrially. I'm a perpetrator. I did it for 20 years. So this is a sixth-generation farm, but my grandchildren are the sixth. I'm the fourth. My children are the fifth. My grandchildren are the sixth. And to answer your question, I'll take you back to when my great-grandfather came to this piece of land in 1866 and farmed it all his life. And the way he farmed it the Harrises are not known for keeping good historical records, but we know how people farmed in that era. And it would have been with a lot of focus on doing the right things by the land, the animals, and the community, because that's what you did. That's what you did. He was followed by his son, my grandfather, who also farmed the land properly. This would have been in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the first generation to go awry was my dad. My dad was born in 1920. And he was a very, very good industrial farmer. Post-World War II, because World War II ended in 1945. So he would have been 25 years old at the end of the war. And that's when we industrialized. That's when his generation industrialized agriculture. And we can talk about that a long time. But he farmed this land industrially for his career and was very successful. He was... When he died, he left me a 1,000-acre farm, paid for a good herd of cattle, a little bit of money. And all I ever wanted to do was farm industrially the way my father did. I was born in 1954. I went to the University of Georgia. I graduated in 1976. I majored in animal science. That's kind of interesting. Early on, it had been animal husbandry, but by the time I graduated, it was animal science. And I came home and ran the farm for 20 years, very industrially, as my father had. And I really enjoyed it for most of that time. And I was financially successful. I went back and looked after the fact. And I never didn't make money in the 20 years I farmed this farm industrially. I paid taxes every single year. I reached a point that I didn't like it anymore. We could talk a long time about that. But I transitioned the farm to what we're doing today. And that caused two of my three daughters to want to come back here with their spouses. Of course, they're having children. So that's the lineage.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm very curious about a few of the things that you said there. Number one, if it was working and it was financially successful, but you still chose to risk it, let's say, by flipping it on its head, there must have been some inherent motivation. And I'm guessing when you were getting going, it wasn't a podcast or a social media post or a trendy movement or terms like regenerative agriculture. It was something else. What was it that you saw or felt or experienced being somebody that was doing it the classical way, or maybe the neoclassical way, let's say, who then felt something was wrong or off or saw something that didn't sit right and decided to risk it and change everything despite being quote unquote successful?
Well, we were successful financially. We were not rich people, but we lived comfortably, made money every year, and I had no debt. It was fine. And my reasons for changing were not monetary. I didn't think I was going to necessarily make more or less money when I changed the way we farm. It was a reaction to the excesses of that industrial farming that I had been doing all my life. I was an abuser. I was a heavy-handed. If the label instructions said to put a pint per acre, I put a quart. But I think the reasons I changed is because I was so heavy-handed. If the label instruction said that animals should be injected with 1 cc per 100, I would inject them with 2 cc's per 100, because if a little does a little good, more would certainly do better. If it said put a pint to the acre, I would put a quart to the acre for the same reasons. So because I was such a heavy-handed abuser seems a little strong, but that's probably as good a word as I can come up with. I became increasingly aware of the unintended consequences of those tools I was using, and didn't want to use them anymore.
You said around the 1950s-ish was when the industrial state of farming really took over. And I've heard you speak in the past, and I think this is really fascinating for people to understand who might otherwise have no clue about this. But a lot of materials or chemicals, if you will, left over from war and the production of weapons, etc., were then used to introduce into our agricultural systems, right? So I'm curious what those were, what the impact was, and what were we doing before? Is that the key? Like before we weren't using these things, and therefore that's kind of what we're returning to. But it changed everything seemingly overnight, and this was something that your father used and you would then use, and this idea of, like you said, more is better. So if we have some of this, let's put it everywhere. What was the story there, and what were these things that came into the industrial farming model that now, I think, with a bit of hindsight, we're realizing were maybe not so good?
Well, there are a lot of them, and you're right. You said the 50s, and you're correct in that. That's when it really had become a ritual recipe for growing a crop. But it really started right after World War II. My dad, I was born in 54, so this predates me, but my dad said that right after the war, in 1946 or so, a salesman came to Bluffton, this little town I'm in, and had a big fish fry to invite farmers to give them 10 pounds or so of ammonium nitrate fertilizer to take home and just see how magical it was. Now, ammonium nitrate fertilizer, I believe, was invented or found or discovered or whatever you do with a chemical in the late 1800s. But it was very expensive and farmers couldn't afford to use it. So it wasn't until the post-World War II that the explosives manufacturing capacity to make bombs for the war materials for the war, could be converted over to make ammonium nitrate fertilizer to be used in agriculture, cost effective. So, and for those farmers, my dad used to tell a story. It was just magic to put that white powder out there on your grass and wet it, put water it in, and give it 3 or 4 days. I mean, nobody could believe how it grew. And you could see, my dad's generation could see the benefit of that chemical, that ammonium nitrate, that chemical reaction, chemical/microbial reaction. But they couldn't see the unintended consequences that was causing that were bad. You know, it was oxidized. It immediately oxidized some percentage of the organic matter in the soil, which cost the soil. But you couldn't see that. You could see the grass, couldn't see the loss of organic matter, or the loss of worms, other insects. So all the unintended consequences were hidden. That's so often the case, but the benefits are so obvious. Think about drugs that you take today. You take something because it makes you feel better, whatever malady you might have. But then later on, you find out it caused your kidneys to shrink or something. So that's the same kind of deal.
Yeah.
On and on. We could talk about a lot of different things. The ammonium nitrate was the big one, but these guys left the farm plowing with mules, went to the European theater and drove tanks. When they came home, they didn't want to plow a mule; they wanted a tractor. So it's just on and on. Nerve, pesticides came from nerve gas chemistry. On and on.
And I've heard you say in the past, and it's something I've since borrowed because it makes so much sense, and most people have never heard it, that all of the sides, pesticides, rodenticides, fungicides, like homicide, is death. And the unintended consequences at first you might be like, wow, look at the life of the green lushness of this grass. But what you're not seeing is the death of soil. And I think that is a huge part of this regenerative movement, this holistic grazing and this management, that we're now probably trying to undo the unintended consequences. The old adage that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We couldn't see that or anticipate it. It looked like all win, all good. And now we're trying to heal, seal, refertilize these soils in more of a holistic way using animals, not necessarily using these chemical inputs. So what's the story there? When this farmland that you inherited, this 1,000 acres that had been commercially and chemically farmed, and now healing through that, what's a timeline on something like? What do you actually see? Is nature quick to heal if you remove the synthetic inputs? Does it take a lot of practice and time? Like, how long has that journey been going for you?
It does take a lot of time. Nature doesn't heal. Nature always heals. Nature doesn't heal quickly. Before I answer that, I want to speak to what you said about the sides. The change in attitude when we embraced modern agriculture was kill the problem. Be analytical, decide what your problem was out there, and know what chemistry it took to kill it. And the better you were at that, the better industrial farmer you were. And I was good at it. We made money every year. That's what I did. What I've done all my life. My dad taught me how to do it, and the University of Georgia taught me how to do it. But that's not when we changed the way we farm. It wasn't about killing something. It was about keeping everything alive. I certainly have the products that I monetize that I want to see maximize production as much as I can, but killing the pest is not the problem. Improving the system, improving the productivity is the goal here. Used to, when I was farming industrially, raising cattle, all of my pastures were Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, which is a hybrid Bermuda grass bred at the University of Georgia that yields incredible amounts of foliage because it can assimilate incredible amounts of chemical fertilizer. When I quit using chemical fertilizer, all of my Tifton 85 died. Went away, not at one time, but it went away over in decline. Prior to that, if you were growing in my pasture, if you were a plant species and you were growing in my pasture and you weren't Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, I'd kill your ass. I would find something and spray you with it and kill you. So the difference in what I do now versus what I do then is keeping the system alive and growing and spinning off an abundance rather than eliminating all the species except the one that I was trying to promote.
Yeah, cool. And I think that really points at a stark difference between death versus life and this conversation that we will certainly have about biodiversity and fostering as much life, microorganisms within the soil, and as much life on the land. Like, you don't just do one animal, you've got many different animals and a lot of life. But before we switch gears and get into that, I'm curious about some of the standout ugly truths of the conventional model, because I think it's important for people to understand these, because I do believe that the pain we feel when we hear these stories can be a great motivator to spur us into some kind of action and change. And the ugly truth of what you was just talking about with the pesticides and such, of destroying the soils, is only one part of the equation. You have the other part here, which is the quality of life of the animals in more of a conventional model, these caged animal feeding operations, the things that they are given to eat, the medications, potentially the vaccinations, the way they are treated. You know, reflecting on your journey, and I'm sure you know other people that farm more, classically and kind of industrially, what are some of the ugly truths you think that are hidden from people about the farming system as it pertains to animal husbandry, health, happiness, etc.?
Well, I think that's a good one to talk about. Animal welfare is an issue that you hear more and more discussion of. And when I was farming industrially, the cattle was my crop. I was a cattleman. I would have, if you had told me my animal welfare was not good, I would have taken you outside and whipped you, because I thought it was great. Because my definition of good animal welfare during that part of my life was, if I keep them well fed, well watered, safe from harm, and reasonably comfortable, that was good animal welfare. That's as good as you can do. And I believe that. I mean, I would have argued with you at length about it. And it's not true. That's not true. You have to do those things. That's essential. But you also have to offer them the opportunity to express instinctive behavior. If you have a child and you keep him in a closet, but in that closet you leave the light on, it's 72 degrees, there's plenty of food in there for him, there's a mattress. I mean, that's good animal. That's good child rearing, like animal welfare. He's comfortable, but it's terrible. I mean, it's awful because they don't get to express instinctive behavior. They want to go outside and climb a tree and throw a football and do whatever else kids do. And chickens want to scratch, hogs want to root and wallow, cows want to roam and graze. And depriving them of that instinctive behavior is horrible animal welfare.
Mm.
But I did not know that. You couldn't have convinced me of that 30 years ago, but I know now.
Yeah, there's an old saying, when we know better, we can do better. And I think that, that analogy of like keeping the child in the closet from a safety and well-fed standpoint maps beautifully onto like the classical animal raising standard. Is that the standard we're holding ourselves to? When really, if you proposition that to any person about a human, they're like, well, no, that's terrible. And that's akin to what we're doing to millions and millions of animals in different ways. And I think really seeing that, feeling that, for me personally, being a little homesteader, as we were talking about offer, having some chickens, I have 21 chickens. I'm going to catch you one day, Will. We got our massive 21 chickens and 3 goats. We're coming for White Oak Pastures level, but seeing the way they can't be confined. If you let them live naturally, they want to roam. They go like a mile away into the woods, and the pecking and the foraging, and they need to do that. And I think that it's interesting. It's akin maybe to how we raise people, like we don't have truly free range people. They're very domesticated. They do live these very like in a box lifestyle. Everything comes in a box, and the schools and their institutions are in a box, and it's all very safe. It's this peaceful slavery as opposed to this dangerous freedom. And with that comes a lot of greenwashing of terms too. A lot of, oh no, it's grass fed, but I know you speak about what that actually means and how damaging that can be to the movement when someone can throw out something like free range chicken, or they say they have outdoor access, or this is grass fed, and then people believe that they're choosing an animal that had a really good life, when in reality maybe not so much. So how big of an issue is the greenwashing with these labels, and maybe a little bit of purposefully misleading the consumer?
Well, it is an incredible part of this whole equation, and in fact, when I went into this business 25 years ago, I had to figure it out, but I didn't have to combat greenwashing. It wasn't happening 25 years ago. I know, and then we made it through those early formative years, and it's fine. I've got friends and acquaintances who are smarter than me, better businessmen than me, and financially stronger than me, who have failed in this business because they started it much later than I did and had to combat greenwashing. And greenwashing will break you. It will break a farmer. It just will. And I can give you a lot of examples, but the best one is currently. Did you know that you could, if you you could, but a big meat company can import beef from 20 different countries and label it as product of the USA, proudly label it product of the USA, though the animal was bred, born, raised, and slaughtered in probably Uruguay, Australia, New Zealand, or 17 other countries. I mean, it is such a gross insult to the consumer that it's just incredible to me that can happen illegally, but it is happening legally.
Yeah,
it has been. Yeah.
I was going to say, that is really crazy. And I'm curious as to how. Is that the extension of these kind of mass industrialized, like corporately captured institutions that basically produce the overwhelming majority of our meat? I forget the statistic, but it's only a few, right? Meat producers that produce like the overwhelming majority. So therefore, they're not even bending the rules at this point. They're just rewriting them, it sounds like.
Oh, they're not breaking the rules. They're writing the rules. It's called country of origin labeling. And what it says is, you read the fine print, that if value is added in this country, it's product of the USA. And there needs to be no mention of where the animal was born, raised, stunned, skinned, and butchered. It's a product of the USA. And it's that and similar rules have really stymied the growth of what we do here. we've been able to survive here because we started early enough, and it's not okay, but we've survived. But it's put a lot of people out of business, and it's me that rule is being reconsidered now. It's getting a lot of publicity, and I hope your listeners will look into country of origin labeling and express an opinion to the lawmakers.
That's fascinating, because I feel like compared to the average person, at least, that I'm a little more clued up in this space because I get to talk to wonderful people like yourself, and I had no clue about that, and that's really quite shocking. And you mentioned how this is putting farmers of U.S. origin out of business and such, and I think it'll be no surprise to you, maybe a surprise to our listeners, that the kind of depression and suicidal ideation, etc., in the farming community is higher than that of the veteran community, because it's so difficult, probably because of a lot of this malpractice and lack of integrity. Like, you're so deep in this, you've probably had friends and family and people around you. Like, just how difficult is it now to even to kind of like stand up against this and fight it? You keep saying, I was lucky to some degree that I got in when I did. What's it like trying to fight this monster now as somebody trying to get going? What's it like for the person that gives a damn now to try and stand up to this beast?
I don't know that a farmer could be very successful fighting the beast now. If you want to have a very small place and raise your own food, you could certainly do. You're under the radar. You'd be fine. But it's very, very difficult to fight big food. Then I really worry about it. When I started this making this change, a very dramatic change that we made, at some level, I thought I was an early innovator in a new way of feeding the country. I don't know that I put those words together, but I was thinking something like that. But along the way, I've seen that that's not the way that's going to work. As we were successful and others followed a similar path to ours, big food just closed the gap. They just said all the same things that we were saying in a voice much louder than we could muster, and sold the product instead of us. It's really and I don't know what's going to become of it. I have no idea how this is going to work out. I can't imagine my side really winning and being successful. But I do know that the unintended consequences of the way we're feeding ourselves now cannot last. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out. Somebody a lot smarter than me is going to have to figure it out. And sadly, I won't live to see it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about, maybe smarter from a academic standpoint, I guess. But when I often think about the people that I want leading the charge for the future, I think I want people like you. I think I want people that are smart enough to work with nature and feed us, because when we don't have food, I think we're up shit creek without a paddle. And I think the things that you're alluding to here is a potential future where that dystopian reality becomes the lived reality that we get to experience. But at the same time, I know that you're not throwing in the towel. You're not willing to, just give up, and you're going down swinging, hence the buck. So there must be something. There must be something that we can do, whether it's at a grassroots level, how do we change these incentives? So what is your hopelessly optimistic thesis for the things that we can do based on what you know? How do we at least start to try to turn the ship and, have a bold return to giving a damn?
Well, in our case, I'm actually reasonably optimistic. Me and my family are going to be okay for a while. We've got a good farm, we've got a good production system, we've got a good marketing system. And we're not, our return on investment is horrible, but we're making a living and living comfortably and doing fine, and that's okay. That's fine. I do have concerns for the people who are not in a position to raise their own food. And I think that those people really should be working towards finding a relationship with someone that they can support in a mutually beneficial way. They'd support the farmer to help him make a living. He'd support them by providing their needs and have those relationships. And I think it'd be great if it could be done through existing grocery commercial ways. I'm not sure that's possible. We sell to grocery stores, but it's less and less. My biggest customer was Whole Foods Market, and they ceased to do business with me. And it was painful, but it's okay. We found enough people to buy from us directly. And consumers are going to have to work to find farmers that they can support, and the farmers are going to have to work to keep the trust and satisfaction of those customers. But when that relationship is built, when it's put together, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's good for the farmer, good for the consumer, good for the planet, good for the animals. It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think looking at it objectively, that the way that you're doing it is about as good as we can do it in terms of this regenerative framing, that you are healing the soils. It's the best possible outcome and life for the animal. It's the healthiest product for the consumer. It's us spending our dollars where they actually matter, and trying to shore up a future of soils, because I know we always hear, there's only 50 years, 60 years left of healthy soils and such and such. I'm curious, being a beacon of hope in that space for so many people, why did Whole Foods choose to discontinue if they're supposed to be a beacon of putting the healthiest products on the shelves as well?
Well, Whole Foods changed a lot. They were my first customer, my biggest customer, well, second customer. They were my biggest customer. And I'm not here to villainize them. Amazon bought Whole Foods, and Amazon has a way of doing business, and I didn't fit into that. And I'm not saying they're evil people or crooked people or hateful people, but I did not fit in that model. And I do want to say that we're bigger. White Oak Pastures is bigger in terms of how much we produce right now than I ever intended to be. And this business I'm in, raising food, is not meant to be highly scalable. It's meant to be highly replicatable. There can be many, many, many of us. And I don't want to ship food to Washington State and California. We do. We ship a little bit, not much. It costs a lot to ship it that far. But I wish that we had regional farms. I really wish there could be one in every rural community. But I don't know what's possible and what's not. But I am not here on your show today to blow up sales for White Oak Pastures in Maine and Oregon and New Mexico. That's not why I came to be here. I want sophisticated consumers in all the states, all the communities, to find a farmer whose production system they find pleasing, and support them, support each other. The consumer needs to know that unless something absolutely horrendous happens, they can get their next potato or tomato or loaf of bread from their farm. And the farmer needs to know that he can plant those potatoes and tomatoes and wheat and have somebody that's going to buy it from him. So forming those symbiotic relationships is what I want to urge everybody to do.
Yeah, I think collaboration, it definitely beats competition in this sense, because this is a competition where it's It's not when you win, it's just for you. Like if you win in this model, we all win. But if we keep feeding the industrialized beast, I think they win and everybody else loses. So I like this idea of kind of the ripple effect of not trying to dominate and be like White Oak Pastures is the only option. It's like, hey, take this model, replicate, and let's do this in all 50 states to the best of our ability, because maybe then we actually give ourselves a shot. And when you've spoke about that, I've heard you use this term resiliency. We talk about regenerative, basically putting inputs back in and creating biodiversity. But I'm really curious on your take around resiliency of a farm too. Like you managed to not only survive a difficult period with the pandemic, where I had firsthand experience of this. The people I were getting my beef from, they were local farmers, and they were basically out. They couldn't get a processing date in a plant for, I think they were saying maybe 12 to 18 months. And I'm driving around, all I can see is cows, but I can't get food. And you shore up some resiliency on White Oaks Pastures, maybe a different way. And maybe that's something inspiring and hopeful for people to hear about too. So what's the story there in terms of your resiliency?
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly how to answer that. I consider resiliency to be a starring attribute. When I die, nobody's going to say he was brilliant, or he was beautiful to look at, or he could, get a football down the field faster than anybody else. But I believe they'll say that I would stick with it and make it happen. And that's resilience to me. It's the determination. When I was a kid, I don't want to digress too far here, but we used to talk about grit. Have you ever heard the term grit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of people hadn't heard that term, and I was shocked. We have a lot of young people that work here, and I said something about grit one day, and they didn't know what I meant. And I explained it to them. And it's incredible to me how in one or two generations, when I was a kid, being told you had grit was the best thing you could say to somebody. And today, people don't know what it means. And I think that's very telling. I think that we have let resiliency, determination, grit kind of go by the wayside in our society. And maybe it's because it's not really politically, what's the word, smart. I mean, it's a little combative, and those things are frowned on these days. But I think resiliency, the ability to stick with it and get the job done, is a very important attribute.
Yeah, I think this ability to stay responsive and think on your toes and not be victimized by what's going on. Like when the pandemic hit, for example, like, oh no, what are we going to do? We can't do anything. It's like, okay, this is difficult. What are we going to do? I know you you literally set up processing plants on your farm, right? To kind of avoid the shutdowns. Like that's an amazing, and in hindsight, borderline genius pivot, because it creates resiliency again. You can't get a date. Oh, guess what? Well, we have our own thing set up. And I think, that ability to dig, and of course, not everybody's going to have options for that, but it models a state of mind. It models an attribute that I must agree, I admit, and, in comparison to yourself, you're more of an elder. I'm a lot younger, but then there's a younger generation, beneath me. And it seems to have bred into our institutions this virtuous victimhood that all we do is point the finger of blaming and complaining, and life should be easy, so that when it gets hard, we don't know what to do. We don't have that grit. We've come a little bit too soft, instead of being able to be a little rough around the edges, rough and ready and rugged and adaptable to make it work. So I think there's some wisdom in that about, just getting our hands dirty, rolling the sleeves up, and some good old fashioned hard work. I'm curious, your take from a firsthand perspective on this term that gets thrown around a lot with regenerative agriculture, like biodiversity. How would you help somebody understand what that means and why it's so important on a farm and in soils and in animals, and actually raising different kinds of animals on the same, farm?
That's a good question. So biodiversity is indeed a part of nature. Different creatures living in symbiotic relationships with other creatures, and it's, microbes, insects, all the way up the food chain, and across the lines, plants benefiting from animals, benefiting from plants, benefiting from animals. And it's the way, it's just literally the way nature works. I tell people, can you think of a single monoculture that exists in nature on this planet? Can you think of one?
No.
I can't. If you think about the seas, the mountains, the deserts, the plains, there's many different species of flora, fauna, animals, plants living in symbiotic relationships with each other. And that's how the bounty that just built life on this earth has accumulated over the eons. And really, again, post World War II, we have selected this monocultural production model where we want nothing but potatoes in the potato field and nothing but tomatoes in the tomato field and nothing but hogs in the swine production facility, just purely monocultural. And how wrong that is, because you throw symbiosis away completely.
And I think the most stark example of this rejection of biodiversity is this move to something like lab-grown meat, for example. I'm very curious of your thoughts of somebody that's been doing this and obviously cares about this a lot, as do I, about the increasing acquisition of land from technocrats like Bill Gates, the largest owner of farmland in the United States, this push to lab-grown meat, which seems to me to be the antithesis of biodiversity. What's your take on this movement? What do you think's going on here with this Bill Gates acquiring land, lab-grown meat, taking away, land from farmers that want to do it regeneratively and create that symbiosis?
Well, it's kind of two different things there to me, but for someone like Mr. Gates to acquire these incredible amounts of acreage of a farmland is really concerning to me. I defend, as a private citizen of this republic, I defend his right to do it. That's property rights. I'm a great advocate of that.
Mm-hmm.
But as a student of nature and a student of the soil, to have a person who has no understanding of the natural systems of this land he's buying is concerning to me. I realize that he could hire any number of people that understand how that works, but it appears that it's going the other way, and the places are monocultural, industrially farmed kinds of places, and that's concerning to me. The other side of it was what was the factory farm? What was the other part of that question?
Yeah, so the phase one, which you took care of well, is this, push to these monocultures, row crops as far as the eye can see to basically create, beyond burgers, etc. And then this new adjacent thing, which is lab-grown meat, taking nature out of it completely. Like, why don't we just grow cows and burgers in vats and, in inputs from God knows what? What's your take on the whole lab-grown meat situation?
Well, I certainly don't know a lot about that. I certainly don't know enough about it to condemn it or argue the fact. But the fact that every step that I've seen technology take us further and further away from the natural production system has not ended well or is not ending well. And I see this as a huge further divergence from the natural system. And I really don't consider that to be my competitor. I mean, maybe it will one day. I mean, I'm not saying we can't feed the world that way, but I bet we can't feed the world that way without a whole huge different set of problems. So I can't worry about that right now. Right now, my nemesis is the big implanted monocultural industrial farming system that's been growing and growing and growing since World War II, and is having more and more and inflicting more and more damage on our land, our water, our environment, rural communities, I think society in general. So, I'm not going to worry about the second opponent yet, which is lab-grown meat.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still fighting the first opponent, which is monocultural, industrial produced meat. That I've been close enough to the monocultural situation to know how damaging it is. I can only speculate, but it's a further step in the wrong direction. I'm pretty sure of that.
With that on the table, in terms of that is the big boss, if you will, to really push back again, to really try and change the direction, or to stop the ship from sinking altogether. You mentioned in your book that you believe that we need to return to a radically traditional way of doing it. And I think, again, I think you said it beautifully, every time we've interjected technology, we've moved simultaneously further away from nature, seemingly further away from the solution, and maybe on the surface level, just like these chemical inputs solved one problem but caused a dozen others. Is it fair to say that, from your experience, your understanding, everything you're doing with healing the soil and CO2 sequestration in the soils and everything with White Oak Pastures, that the only way that we can save soils is this regenerative model that includes animals, that isn't just corn and soy fields, etc.? Does it require animals? Does it require fundamentally the way that it's always been, these regeneratively grazing animals moving over land?
Yes. It's part of the system. The earth evolved. The earth evolved with these symbiotic relationships between animals, microbes, plants, and it yielded an abundance. And the abundance, if you look at a globe, I can see a globe right over there. It's beautiful. It's green and blue, and it's just beautiful. Look at those shots of the earth from space. It's beautiful. And the abundance that created that, look at the further abundance. Look at all that coal and oil and natural gas from the era of the dinosaurs that we've been living on for the last 80 or 100 years. That symbiosis, that bounty of nature occurs from that cyclical interaction between microbes, plants, animals, and we've broken that, and we've let me take just a second and explain something that we kind of left out. The difference in cyclical and linear.
Mm-hmm.
Your comment you just made it seem like I'm anti-technology, and I could see how you could make that statement, but I want to make it clear I'm not anti-technology. I think we embrace technology pretty good. I think I'm on my fourth drone now. We've been through. I had the first one of anybody that I know of in this business down here, and I love technology. I got all the stuff that anybody else has got, and it's fine.
Yep.
But there are linear systems and cyclical systems. And technology works beautifully in a linear system, not so well in a cyclical system. Agriculture, farming, nature is cyclical. Technology is very linear. And it's powerful. Technology is powerful. And it was so powerful, we kind of got drunk on it. And we took this linear system of technology and applied it to this natural cyclical system, which is food production, nature out here. And it worked beautifully for a long time. As far as you could see, you just couldn't see very far. You couldn't see what was happening. But we were inflicting incredible damage to the environment, to the ecosystem, to on and on, from meteorological all the way down to seismic. So uh, using this powerful linear technology to, in these very cyclical natural systems, increases production exponentially in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
In the long term, it does incredible damage. And the damage can be fixed, but it's fixed more slowly than it's inflicted. You asked earlier about, so my dad started damaging this farm, I think, in a very noticeable way in 1945 with technology, big equipment, big tillage, pesticides, chemical fertilizer, etc., other things, antibiotics in the animals, all the tools. And it brought the land's productivity down to a very low point. And I've been working to improve it for the last 25 years and have made dramatic improvements. I really don't know how it compares today to when my dad started the other way in 1945. I don't know. I don't have a basis to compare. I know that we had oxidized the organic matter on this farm down to about 0.5%. That's negligible. It's a dead mineral medium. Today, using animal agriculture and the other tools that we use, we're up to 5% organic matter, 10x fold. And to put that in perspective for you, 1% organic matter will hold about 27,000 gallons of water per acre, about a 1 inch rain event. So when my dad and I degraded this quality of this soil down to 0.5% organic matter, it would only absorb a 1/2 inch rain event. But that's not going to run off. We get 5 or 6 inch rain events in the coastal plains where I live. Today it's 5% organic matter, a little over 5 actually. So it can absorb a 5%, a 5 inch rain event. And if you look at our website, whiteoakpastures.com, there's some pretty compelling videos that clearly, inarguably demonstrates that. My land versus my neighbor's land.
The one thing I think is incredibly hopeful here, and maybe I'm a little confused as to why it isn't being adopted as a mainstream view, is everything that you're talking about, the ability to, capture that rainwater, healthy soils, and a clear path to regeneration also factors into this carbon equation. And you've demonstrated that those healthy soils with these animals on them become beneficial to the environment. And to loop and come full circle back on the technology conversation, I love that you made that distinction that, technology can be a tool that if you use it in the right way, it can be incredibly profound. But if the tools start to use us, then we become the tools, and one of the things that's often with more of this technologically obsessed or technocratic future is this push to get rid of animals off land, because of cow farts and burps and carbon in the atmosphere. And it's all about, the carbon emissions. So we should only do plants instead. And I think what maybe is being missed is that you can do animal husbandry and regenerative agriculture, feed people great food that it actually fuels them from a health perspective, but also helps the environment too. And it seems to be that that's completely missed, either because it's not understood or it's completely missed because it doesn't fit some kind of narrative or agenda. So how do you try and square that circle of helping people understand that, not all animal husbandry is destroying the climate and punching holes in the, the ecosphere, and that it's actually helping?
First thing I would do is, again, direct them to our website. It's and there's a study on our website, a scientific study done by an environmental engineering firm, international environmental engineering firm called Quantis, Quantis, and it shows the impact of that I was just discussing, that moving this land here from 0.5% to 5% organic matter. and it's compelling. It's very, very compelling. Our cattle operation is carbon negative. Our cattle, yes, they flatulate and burp like anybody else's cattle. Yes, they do. They do. But the small amount of CO2 and other greenhouse gases they put back up are a small portion of what they pull down. The pastures that my cattle graze are continually photosynthesizing and pulling down greenhouse gases that are in our atmosphere. Every bit of it comes from up there, all of it. So all the carbon dioxide, all of it is photosynthesized. Some of it is built into the root mass under it. We've got 36-inch roots thick on our farm. All that used to be greenhouse gas. And then the rest of it makes forage up here. We put our cattle through about every 60 days. They graze down the forage, hard impact, graze it down, then a long recovery time, building it back up. So of the carbon it pulls down from greenhouse gas in that 60-day period, some of it, as I said, photosynthesized in the root. Some of it goes out in feces. Some of it's turned into beef that we market, bones that we market, hides that we market. But it's just beautiful. It's cycling. Mm. And that's not what happens sadly, that's not the case in a confinement animal feeding operation, cafe. And the misled environmentalists that want to beat up ruminants, cattle, use that model to express how it works instead of our model. It's calculated. I've been on little debates with those people, and it's just horrible. Mm. If a person is a vegetarian, and I know who my audience is here, and that's fine. I'm not catering to you or dismissing you either one. But if a person is vegetarian or vegan because they just can't stand the idea of an animal dying so they could eat, that's fine. I respect it. Don't eat it. I'll get you some lettuce or something. If it's because it's just yucky, just can't stand the mouth feel, there are reasons why some people may choose to be vegetarians or vegans, and it's fine. I respect it, and I'll accommodate it. Hmm. Sadly, there are militant vegetarians and militant vegans, and they believe they should not eat meat, and that me and you and nobody else should be allowed to eat meat, and that's not okay. And a lot of these people are liars and charlatans, and they want to paint the meat business in the ugliest possible way. And they use the confinement animal feeding operation example to whip us with it. And that's not what I do. You can't use that to whip me.
Would you say that there is, from a top-down level of the people that steer that narrative the most in pop culture with movies and documentary and cowspiracies, and again, the painting with a very broad brush to try and compare something that you do to the caged animal feeding operation. But what do you think is the real incentives there? Is it purely profit-driven? Do these people just see a mass amount of profit to be made here in terms of their ability to just congregate massive amounts of wealth and, simultaneously maybe even believe that they are saving the environment? Or do they know that they're kind of, just coming up with a false hypothesis here and doing what's trendy so they can make a boatload of money? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, I certainly don't know the answer to your question, but you've invited me to speculate, so I will. The vegetarianism or veganism is not new. It's been around for a long, long time, but it's never really caught traction with great numbers of people internationally. Pockets maybe, but not international. Suddenly, they've gotten really good at it. There's just a lot of money put into convincing people that animal agriculture, eating meat, animal agriculture, particularly ruminants, is really a villainous horrible thing that should be eliminated completely, immediately. And, that's happening about the same time that the pseudo meat industry has burgeoned. And, I don't know who paid who to do what, but, I just don't think it's an accident. I think that there's a I know there's a concerted effort to stop people from producing and eating ruminant meat in general. Let's just talk about meat in general. And there's money behind it, and it's easy to villainize people like me. It's easy to villainize people like you that eat a lot of meat, and people like me that produce meat. But I'm unapologetic. We operate with full transparency. People can come and look. I built lodging in a restaurant so people could come and stay here and look. So that'll be the truth, our shield and sword.
I unfortunately feel the same way as you, that there is a concentrated effort to demonize and look to eliminate the villainous meat eaters, and that it seems to be largely profit driven, and incentives drive outcomes. And I really love what you're doing to try and change the incentives, even at a small grassroots movement, because I think it's bigger than we could imagine. The ripple effects that we create by changing just one person's mind and how they get to vote with their dollar. And I guess I've just got a couple of questions for you, and then we're going to bring in a couple of our caller questions. My first one of those is, if you would to kind of give some kind of call to action to the listener in terms of how they can healthily push back against that emerging narrative and support, people doing it the right way, what's your biggest call to action? What's your biggest challenge to those people in order to support systems that are regenerative in their nature?
I think for the consumer out there that's listening, finding a farmer or two or three that produce food in a manner that's pleasing to you. It doesn't have to please anybody but you. And supporting them and doing so vocally, verbally, obviously, is the way to win the war. Now, I will say this. So I hate it when farmers want to say get in the discussion of the way I farm is better than the way you farm. That is so subjective. One of the things that's wrong with the university land grant agricultural system that I went to, University of Georgia, College of Agriculture, is that we learn how to raise cows and hogs and sheep and goats from professors from all over the world. I literally had professors from all over the country and all over the world, other countries, and teaching me how to raise cows in Georgia. And that's such a boilerplate. The way you raise animals on your farm should be determined by what works in your ecosystem, whether it's coastal plains, mountains, deserts, it's all over the board. Even here in my county, 20 miles that way, it's different. So the farming system should be determined by the ecology of the landscape. So the animal welfare systems, all the systems that are out there, I've had all those certifications in my life. It's very imperfect because it's so different in Southwest Georgia, Southwest Maine, and Southwest California. I think you've got to find you a farmer who farms in a manner that pleases you. Mm. And the closer to home, the better. I don't want to ship beef all the way across the country. Right. I want to ship beef in the South. So I think those are important things.
Powerful, powerful. And one more question from me, because I think this, you might not recognize it as such, maybe because you're smart enough and wise enough to stay off social media, etc. But White Oak Pastures and yourself are garnering a certain amount of fame and notoriety in this regenerative space as a leader. And I'm curious, like, what comes with that? Of course, this kind of kicked off with a appearance on Fox News that led into a Joe Rogan interview. Talk to me a little bit about that journey over the last couple of years. What was it like to appear on Fox News, and what everything that happened since then?
Well, the appearance I made on Fox News wasn't much fun. He pissed me off. I was asked, Stuart Varney's that guy's name, and I don't watch news much. I don't get involved in so I don't watch TV much. I don't watch Instagram much either. But this Stuart Varney from Fox News asked me to be on his show, and it was to talk about Bill Gates' ascent in agriculture. And I have opinions on that. I stated some of them earlier in our conversation. So it's 5 minutes. So I sat down and wrote down how I felt about that. And I'm not out to skin Bill Gates. I think that he's a technocrat, and that's not the right approach for a natural system like agriculture. But I don't think he's an evil man. I don't know him. Mm-hmm. But I wrote it down, and I was prepared to give him a little talk. And he asked me the question, and I started responding. And I hadn't said many words yet. But why? And he wouldn't let me talk. I mean, every time I start talking, I fucked that up pretty good, and I did a bad job. So when we got off the air, I was very dissatisfied, and Jenny, my daughter, just videoed me having the talk without Stuart Varney and put it on our social media, and Joe Rogan saw it and contacted Jenny. She gets all our incoming, and asked me to be on his show. And I didn't know who Joe Rogan was. I'd never heard of Joe Rogan. And Jenny said she was really excited. She got a chance. We got a chance to go be on the Joe Rogan show. And I said, "We're good. That's fine." She said, "You got to go to Austin." I said, "I ain't going to Austin." "Oh yeah, you're going to Austin." But I did, and he gave me the opportunity to just tell my story like I thought it ought to be told. And he invited me to be back on his show again in November this year. So he was a very kind person. I mean, I don't know how you feel about him, how you always feel about him. I don't have much of an opinion, except he was very gracious in allowing me to tell what I had to say. And I appreciate him having me back on in November.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're Team Joe Rogan, or at least I speak for myself. I'm Team Joe because he's willing to give people like yourself a platform, and he's becoming one of the biggest independent news media outlets in there. And the fact that he allowed you to come on after that, and to try and fix these problems we're talking about in 5 minutes is completely unrealistic anyway, and gave you the scope of 2.5 hours to do that, and then to come back and do it again is incredible. And this book will tell a lot of that story and a lot of those points, and we'll get everybody pointed in the right direction to this as we wrap up the conversation. But before I let you go, Will, because I know you've got a lot of heartbeats on the farm over there to take care of, not just animals too. I know you employ 110% of your local population or something crazy like that. We also have a couple of questions from our community, so we're going to read those out, and you can take them where you will, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So our little videographer over here, Cade, is going to read us off some of our questions, and we'll see what we've got.
Sweet. So the first question, which came in from our Instagram, Radical Health Radio, is from Haley. She wants to know the differences between corn-fed and grass-fed beef. Do different types of cattle provide different levels of nutrition?
The difference in corn-fed and grass-fed is cattle, like sheep, like goats, are ruminant animals. Ruminant animals have a digestive system that works well for digesting cellulose, like grazing the forage of grass or forbs. And that's what they were designed to eat. That's where they evolved. Evolved is a better word. That's where they evolved to eat, as opposed to a chicken or a hog who has a simple stomach like us. It doesn't have four sections to it. It's just got one simple stomach, and it doesn't work very well digesting cellulose, digesting forage. A hog and a chicken would probably starve to death eating average quality forage all day long. So and there was very little grain-fed beef in the marketplace until post-World War II. Post-World War II, we had the agricultural revolution that we talked about earlier. We put out a lot of chemical nitrogen. Hybrid seed came about, corn seed. We're talking about in the mechanical cultivation of land. Just a lot of things happened to cause an explosion of grain production, particularly corn production in this country post-World War II. When that happened, it became, for the first time ever, cost-effective to feed corn to cattle. It takes about 7 pounds of corn to make a pound of beef. We could argue that a little bit, but that's about right. Corn became so artificially cheap because we were using those technologies that you could afford to feed 7 pounds of corn to a cow and sell the beef and make money on it. So the beef feeding industry was born from really cheap corn that was born from the Industrial Revolution, farming revolution. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you, Will. Do we have any more questions up there, Cade?
Yeah, we got one more. This one's from Matt. He wants to know, what are your thoughts when people say regenerative agriculture is not sustainable?
Well, my first, not to be a smart ass, but what we're doing now is not sustainable. Regenerative is sustainable, but I think I know what they're getting at, and here's the fact. So it costs more to raise food using regenerative land management than it does using the industrial tools. You take direct cost out of production when you use chemical fertilizer, pesticides, those things I just mentioned to you. But the costs don't go away. They're just moved around. So I don't know if you heard about that big, huge dead area in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
It's caused to a great extent by chemical fertilizers and pesticides washing down the Mississippi River. Well, that was those floods of chemical fertilizers and pesticides were caused by industrial farming, and they took a lot of cost out of the production of corn, cotton, soybeans, whatever was grown up that river. But the cost of that was borne by the rest of us when all the fish got killed in the Gulf of Mexico, or much of the life got killed in the Gulf of Mexico. I can go through many, many, many natural system disruptions that are caused by industrial food production, but the costs were not borne by the industrial food production. The cost was borne by society.
Yeah, that's a really cool reframe, actually, like the hidden costs we don't often see. And I think, yeah, I'm glad that you were a smart ass in the first answer to that question, because that's the beautiful, most succinct way to put it. Like, what we are doing anyway is not sustainable. And it's got a lot of these maybe hidden costs that are becoming increasingly more difficult to hide because it's apparent in terms of what we're seeing in terms of soil health, degradation, land mass loss, etc. So Very, very well said. Will, I appreciate you a lot. I appreciate you taking the time with us and our audience today and sharing this knowledge. I think that this is, we speak about existential threats. I believe that this is one of the true ones that maybe doesn't get all the attention it deserves. Because like I said earlier in the conversation, if the food runs out, it's going to get really ugly really quick. And I don't think any of us want a future where we're living off Soylent Green or Bill Gates's Impossible Burgers and becoming nutritionally, from a physical perspective, ill, healthy and frail, and also destroying our soils. And once our soils are wrecked, it's only a matter of time until we as a species is wrecked. So I think it's very, very important what you're doing. I would love for you to continue to point people where they can go. Let's tell them a little bit of your high level take on A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, which it comes out on October 10th, and where everybody should go to keep up to speed with what you're doing and anything else that is on your mind or on your heart.
Well, the book is not an advertising brochure for White Oak Pastures. It's my observations of the industrialization and then deindustrialization of our food production system. And it's, it is what it is. It's my first book. It's my last book. It's the only book I'm going to write. I'm done with that. But I hope that it does help. If it does anything, I hope it helps people gain understanding of how our food system has gone off the tracks.
whiteoakspastures.com. And I think your legacy, which some of it is in this book, but is really in your land and the generations on the farm that you still have there paying it forward. And everybody hopefully picks up that torch and is willing to do their part in either, whether that's voting with their dollar or being crazy enough to just work on their own little systems and their own little farms one day. And, together, maybe we can get through this and maybe it's not such a shit show, but there's going to be some growing pains along the way. So very appreciative for your voice in this space and your leadership. Very excited to continue digging into this book and catch you on Rogan again. Thank you for everything that you guys do at White Oak Pastures, Will. It's been a pleasure. And, friends, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Will. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.